Good afternoon, everyone. Let me first begin by offering thanks to the management and board of the Newark Heath Airport for hosting us at this facility. Unfortunately, as we were getting ready to set up, weather was not cooperating and we weren't able to locate ourselves with the backdrop of the F-4 Phantom. But that has recently been restored, and if you haven't had an opportunity to take an up-close look at it, please do. It really is a unique feature that we have here in Licking County. I also want to recognize members of our Civil Air Patrol. They always stand ready to serve at events that the City of Heath hosts. Thank you for passing out the flags and for your presence here today. We also should recognize the efforts of the Heath American Legion Post 771 in coordinating today's event. Please join me in thanking them for their participation here, having already been to multiple other events today, and thanking them for their past service in our nation's military. Also, our thanks go out to the directors of Heath High School's band and vocal music programs, to the participating students of those programs sharing their selections with us today. I think you'll agree with me that it adds a unique feature to this event. This is the first year our local high school music programs have performed as part of the city's annual Memorial Day ceremony. May this year start a long-running tradition of their involvement with this event. And may the musicians and vocalists each year come away with a greater understanding and appreciation for the ultimate sacrifice our honored members of the United States military have made for them. The Bible teaches us that there is no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friends. This love has been given to all of us by the fallen whom we honor today. Not only did they sacrifice their lives for their shipmates, platoon buddies, air crewmen, but for all of us, their fellow Americans, past and present. And we are left to ponder the magnitude of their sacrifice and to humbly thank them all for it. Allow me to highlight just one display of this level of sacrifice, one of the countless displays throughout the history of our country, but one for which we will mark the 70th anniversary 1 week from today. On the morning of June 4th, 1942, planes from 4 Japanese aircraft carriers struck at Midway Island, a small speck on the map in the middle of the Pacific Ocean between Hawaii and Japan. The American Navy had broken the Japanese naval secret codes and knew an attack was imminent. American torpedo bomber planes on the island were able to take off to attack the Japanese before being destroyed on the ground by their coming attack. These Americans were few in number, relative to the number of Japanese fighter planes protecting their carriers, but they pressed their attack. Knowing full well their planes were slower and less maneuverable than the Japanese Zero fighters, 26 land-based planes hurled themselves at the carriers. Only 11 made it back to Midway Island after the attack, and the Japanese carriers received no damage. While this was going on, 3 squadrons of torpedo bomber planes from nearby American aircraft carriers also had taken off to attack. By the time they reached the Japanese fleet, they met the same fighter planes protecting the ships, and their results were just as unfruitful. All 15 planes from the first attacking squadron were destroyed, and only 1 out of the 30 crew members survived, crash landing in the ocean. The next 2 squadrons had all but 5 and 2 of its planes destroyed respectively, and still, the Japanese carriers remained unharmed. All these American air crews sacrificed their lives. As the final wave of planes from the 3rd Squadron was being wiped out, the Japanese were preparing to launch their own attack from their carrier flight decks. An attack aimed at the American carriers in an attempt to sink them and give Japan the only remaining aircraft carriers throughout the Pacific. The fate of the war hung in the balance. But just at that time, mostly due to blind luck, 3 squadrons of American carrier dive bomber planes dropped out of the sky. The Japanese fighter planes were busy finishing up their attack on the low-flying torpedo bombers, and the sacrifice made by those American torpedo bomber crews proved to be essential. The dive bombers, with no Zeros to harass them, swooped down on the Japanese carriers and turned 3 of them, the Kaga, the Soryu, and the Akagi, into flaming hulks, which soon sunk. Later that day, the 4th and final Japanese carrier launched planes, which attacked and crippled the USS carrier Yorktown. But that afternoon, American carrier planes spotted and destroyed the 4th Japanese carrier, the Hiryu, and the rest of the Japanese fleet retreated back to Japan. The Battle of Midway on June 4, 1942, was the day the tide turned in the Pacific during World War II. Before that day, the Japanese military had great successes. After it, the Americans and their allies slowly but consistently fought their way from island to victory. The sacrifice of lives in those first American air attacks could not have meant more toward the outcome of the war. And yet the bravery, honor, and valor those air crews showed was no more than the countless, sometimes nameless, sacrifices made by many other members of our military who have died to protect our country. On this day, almost 70 years since the Battle of Midway concluded, may our hearts hold solemn the remembrance of the lives of those Americans lost on that day, and those lives lost before and since that day. And may each of us resolve today to live our lives together in a way worthy of the love displayed through their sacrifice. Thank you, and may God continue to bless the United States of America.
assembled to honor heroic dead. 1,000 battles of